Hey guys, and yeah, welcome back. In this video, we'll be looking at dataset processing. So if you remember about CAV lecture stuff, we had about 4 main steps, and one of the first thing is data collection, data processing, and then doing the analysis and visualization. So dataset processing fits into our second step, where we want to make sure that our collected data is in a structured way, and we can manipulate or use it as efficiently as possible. So let's get started with this video. And in this particular unit, we'll be looking at using this library package called Pandas. Pandas is a good tool. It's powerful, flexible, and easy to use open source data analysis and manipulation tool. Basically, it allows us to get some simple view of the data we're dealing with in addition to the analysis. So Pandas does allow you to have some functionalities that you can do some analysis, which we'll cover very shortly. It also provides some visualization effects as well. So if you would like to visualize your data on the spot, I guess, on top of the data, rather than creating like charts, Pandas can be a very useful tool as well. Okay, and for this unit at this time, the last version that I checked is 1.0.3, but low versions should still be functioning similar as what we will cover. So don't worry too much, but if things do break, do read the error message and check whether it's a cause of the error version errors. Okay, if you don't have Pandas installed, then you can simply go to the terminal or the command and then type pip install pandas, and that should fetch all the libraries necessary for it. If you need to update, I think it's a pip install pandas update, I think. Yeah, but do look that up, how to update. If you have some old version, you can always update these packages. Anyway, let's get started. So the very first thing is Pandas works well with spreadsheet data or those data that are already formatted, kind of like Excel files, right? So CSV files, Excel files, any of those files can be dealt with Pandas really easily. Okay. Hopefully, through the data collection, the data has already been categorized and cleaned nicely. And that's what we will assume in terms of data processing. Okay, but Pandas does allow us to look into the content and do some cleanup as well. But that's not really part of this particular video as well. All right, so let's get started. I have tried to increase the font size, so hopefully this is bigger now. Yeah, so import pandas as PD. So pandas typically abbreviated as PD. Then what we can do is read a file using the pandas library, read CSV. So in this particular one, we'll be dealing with CSV files. So if you just chuck everything into a file separated by comma, then you can read it as a CSV file. So here df is our file equals pd.read CSV. Okay, and in this example, we'll be using the file called temporal. Okay, so that's this code here. This is given in the quiz server, so if you haven't downloaded it, you can go and get it from there. So here, if I just type df, it already shows me pretty much the content, what has been loaded. Okay, and we can always check the type of df. This is going to be pandas data frame object. Okay. However, if you have a lot of lines, for this instance, if you open it up, there are 193 lines, looks like, right? Then what it's trying to do is show you some of the beginning and some of the end, but often you don't really have to see all of them. So a quick way of looking at the first few lines is to use the head method associated with the data frame object. So we can go df.head 10. I think my head might be in the way. Okay, and then we press enter, and what this gives us is just the first 10 lines. So this number you specify in here specifies how many lines you would like to pick. So maybe I can do 30, then it's going to show me the first 30 lines inside this file. Okay, so if you just call the data frame itself, then it's going to try to show a little bit of front and a little bit of the back, usually about 5 lines, and everything's separated by these a bunch of dots. But you can use this head method to just preview a few lines in the first few lines of the files that you specify. Okay, so that's the quick way of looking at what kind of data we're dealing with, but often just looking at what it looks like is not really, doesn't give us a good insight about what those data set really contains. So we can use this method called describe, which shows some basic statistics for each column. So if you have multiple columns like that we have here, like we have data science column, machine learning column, deep learning column, and others, then we can use the df.describe method. Then it's going to show us information per column. So each one has 194 counts. So as we saw, we have 193, but if we include 0, that's 194. And it calculates some other basic statistics like mean, standard deviations, the quartiles, the median, and the max, right? So this is a quick way of just getting some basic information about the data set that you contain. If it does contain, like, say, strings or something, it might not work as we anticipated to. Okay, so let's try to modify some of the values inside. So go to temporal, I opened it here, and let's say this had some non-numeric value. Save it, then we have to load the data again, and then we try to describe. What happened was we used to have the data science column, but now, because now we have an invalid value, that column has been discarded in these statistics. So if it cannot calculate those statistics due to the values not behaving as we anticipated to, then what it's going to do is exclude that column in our describe evaluation. All right, so let's change this back at top there. Okay, so now if I put the number back and describe again, then we're going to have this additional column included again, the data science one, because now it has a value which it can calculate those statistics. Okay, so just keep that in mind. If something doesn't show up here, that means somewhere some of the data isn't available for it to calculate these statistics. Okay. The info method shows the content of the data type. So this will be useful to understand maybe what kind of data type we're dealing with for different columns that we have. So if we look at df.info, then it tells us that we have 5 different columns, and these columns have how many numbers? They are not null, which means there are 194 lines populated, and it also shows the data type. So first one, it's thinking it's an object. As you can imagine, this is going to be interpreted as a date. But the remaining data sets are integer 64. That means it all interpreted those as numbers. So if we go back and change this to some alphabet, load it again, and check info, then now the data science has mixed data. So what it's thinking is an object. It can't really say that this is integers or floats. So it's going to treat it as an object. So we can see that if we have some numeric data type for the columns, then it's going to create us our nice describe. Otherwise, it's going to exclude that inside. Okay, put this back and load it again. All right. So this tells us quickly what kind of data that we're dealing with each column, which allows us to quickly determine what kind of operations we can apply them. Or if, say, this one was object again, then we might have to do some processing. For example, for each item that's inside here, we may want to process that further. So as we've seen in the data processing, not the data set processing, but the data processing video a couple of videos back, we can read these and chuck it into the NumPy records. Then we can easily retrieve only these values and then process it quickly, right? So we can always combine these. Okay, so we had a look at about quick display, and by default, the number of rows is roughly about 10. So 5 first and 5 end, but we can always change this. So these set options of display max rows and max columns will allow us to control how much it's going to show us when we look at using those df or df heads. So currently df dot head, if we put 100, it thinks 100 is too much. That's why it limits us. So last time we tried about 20 or 30, so that's reasonable. But once this number gets really high, it thinks it's too much to view. It doesn't want to crash our viewing area, so it's going to shorten it for us. So to control this, what we can do is call these set options. So we're going to set, say the maximum is 500. So until I go over 500, it's not going to shorten our display. So once I have done that and try to display the head again with 100, this time what we end up is actually viewing all the rows up to the 100 that we have without the shortening. So if we have more of columns, then again, this is going to allow us to display more columns. But if we do have more other columns, normally it's going to have a bunch of dots in the middle, one of the middle columns as well, to say that this has been shortened. So these options will allow us to display a lot more columns and rows when we have a look at the data frame. Okay, so this will also affect if we just check the data frame itself. So it shows us that there are 200 records, right? So this is where we typed in, and as you can see, there are no dots in between, and basically we go until the very end. Okay, so that's the difference between those two. Okay. So that's fiddling with viewing the data and how we can manage how we view the data, but Pandas also have some display options, and these display options allow us to improve the display of data through coloring, formatting, and highlighting techniques. So a full detail can be shown in this link here through the style guideline. But in this video, we'll be covering about a couple of basics approach. Okay. Do note that these outputs, usually if you run it from Jupyter Notebook, you can display directly because you're interacting through a browser. But if we are interacting through an IDE, it's not going to display here, but because these shells don't have such display options. So what we have to do is export it as an HTML file and open it in the browser, and we can view it through that. So we are given this HTML writing function, and what we're going to do is just render it to an HTML to see it. Okay, so this is the right file. Okay. Our first example to see is to create a different formatting of the display. So for example, we had string format examples before where you can manipulate the number of decimal points, how the values are displayed onto the shell. And this is essentially the same idea, but we can do the same with Pandas using its formats. So what we're going to do is create a format dictionary. What this tells us is that for each columns that has been identified with the headings, for instance, we have data science. I should change this. df.head 10. Okay. Then we have the data science here, machine learning, deep learning, and categorical. So you don't have to format all of them, but for ones that you want to format, you can create a dictionary and determine how it's going to be formatted. So for this instance, actually the syntax is the same as the Python format, so that's very easy to use. What we're going to do is say this data science column is a monetary value, so we're going to add a $sign at the front and format it to two decimal places. Okay. This is the date column. What we're saying is this is going to be month and year date format instead of displaying the whole string. And machine learning one is going to be formatted into one decimal place, and then we're going to treat it as a percentage, although these don't really, these two doesn't make sense, but it's just for demonstration how we can format these. And for the month and date, we do have to use the date time function. So we're just going to chuck it into toDate time in here, but don't worry too much about handling date time stuff. The key point here is creating this dictionary and formatting it the way you want. Okay, and then we're going to just write it out with df.style format and then pass in the format dictionary. So if we run this, finish. Can take some time, but shouldn't take too long. Here we go. So what I did was I saved it onto demo.html. So if I just load that up, demo.html. Okay. So here you can see that previously df.head, yep. So this is directly seeing from the dataset, so there's no formatting done. So you can see it's 12, 18, 4, and 1. But here it went to $12, 18%, and I haven't edited the other guys. But I edited the first three columns. So here mass has been now changed to month and year format, which we have specified as month and year format separated by a dash. So that's what we have. Data science part has been converted to $, two decimal places, so $, two decimal places, and the machine learning part is one decimal places with a percentage sign at the end. So we can easily change the format of the data files that we want to display as. Okay, so this is different. The head is picking the raw data, whereas writing HTML file, this is actually displaying the data through this format. So we can apply these formatting to improve our display if we need to modify them as well. Okay, so this is before styling and this is after styling that we just saw. Okay, we can improve our display options using colors as well. So for instance, we can highlight maximum and minimum values with colors in the head, for instance. So df.head10.style. So that's what we're going to try. So let's comment these and uncomment these. So again, we're going to create a demo.html file. That's where the displayed values are going to be stored. And in this instance, we're working with head, but if you want to apply this style to all the items, you can simply just remove the head. Okay, so this is just where we select our file, and then dot style is when you apply the style. Okay, so what I'm going to do is highlight max. This will try to find out the maximum values and highlight for us. And in this instance, we're going to use the dark green color. Highlight min, we're going to use this particular color. This is HTML coloring scheme. So you can look that up as well. But there are a few colors that you can define as words. Otherwise, you can use this HTML coloring scheme as well. So if we run that, and wait for it to write the file. Here we go, done. Open demo. So here now, before we had formatting this one, now close that because that has been overridden. So we can see that max is highlighted in dark green. So these values are 12, 12 are max. So if you have multiple max values that are same, they will highlight all of them. Here again, 21 and 21. And minimum values are highlighted in red. Okay, so that's the FF0000. Okay, RGB, so R red, G green, B blue. So this has been maxed, so this will be red color. Okay, so we can easily see out of the files that where the max values and min values are. So let's change that from head to get rid of it. So we want to apply the style to all the values and run it and finish. Yep. And we open the demo file. So now we can see that because now we're dealing with the full set, the location of the min-max values will differ. Okay, so here we find that minimum value in this column will be 4, and there's a few different 4s, and max value is at the end with value 100. Okay, and this confirms with our describe, where here the minimum value was 4 and maximum value was 100. So this is showing us the correct highlighting for us. Okay. Yep. Okay. And we can also do a color gradient to make these highlights stand out a little bit more. So if it's kind of a high-end color, we can do some gradients to show that, and these can be applied in Pandas. Okay, so let's comment these out and using these guys. Okay, so again, writing out to demo.html and only applying it to the head, but you can always remove that. And what we're going to do is use this background gradient. Okay, and what we want to do is apply it to data science and machine learning, and we're going to use these coloring scheme as well. Okay, and we run this and finish now. Okay, good. So now we look at it. So this time the minimum values are not highlighted, but as the value gets higher and higher, it gets darker color in green. Okay, so we can quickly check where the dark colors are, where the light colors are, to see where the min and max are. So for example, if we had like a temperature measurements through the seasons, then we can probably expect from like a dark colors and get lighter, and the light colors and then get darker again and things like that. Okay, so that's the idea of using the coloring scheme. So in this video, we covered about importing data, particularly the CSV file, but Pandas does allow you to interact with some other formats as well. But you can look that up out of your own interest. For this one, you don't really have to go that far, just have to deal with CSV files. And also we looked at how you can pick some statistics out of it, and doing some display options to make data stand out. Okay? So there, again, Pandas is a very comprehensive library, so if you want to find out more details, you can look at full documentation at this link, as well as looking at the styling here. So I think that's it for this video. See you in the next video. Bye bye.